Long after the laughter had stopped, the garden still remembered. The grass had grown tall in some places, thin in others. The fountain no longer sang. The wind moved through the trees like someone trying not to be heard. It had once been the happiest place in the world, or so it seemed. But now it was quiet. Not the soft kind of quiet that holds rest or wonder, the kind that settles when joy leaves and forgets to return. No one came anymore, not the children, not the birds, not the seasons. The gate stayed locked, the stone wall rose high and cold around it like a forgotten promise. And the giant, well, he had grown old. But we are getting ahead of the story. Let us go back to when the garden bloomed. There was once a giant who had a garden so beautiful even the sun lingered when it passed overhead. It was the kind of place that made people slow down without knowing why. The giant had been gone for many years visiting faraway lands. And while he was away, the children in the nearby village discovered the garden. Each afternoon after school and chores, they slipped through the hedge or scaled the low side of the wall. They played with bare feet in the grass. They ran beneath cherry blossoms that shed petals like soft rain. They made up games where every flower was a prize and every tree was a throne. The garden didn't mind. If anything, it welcomed them. Under their laughter, the flowers bloomed brighter. The trees bent lower, offering branches like arms. Even the birds came to sing along. For a time, the garden felt full. Then one day, the giant came home. He stood in the middle of the garden, shocked. His boots crushed petals. His shadow startled the birds. The children froze. "What are you doing here?" he thundered. They ran, scattering like leaves. "This is my garden," he muttered. "Mine alone." He was not a cruel man exactly, but he had grown unused to sound, to joy, to anything that did not begin and end with himself. So the next day he built a wall. Tall, hard, unwelcoming. A sign was posted, "No trespassing. Violators will be punished." No one came anymore. And something strange happened. The sun stopped shining as long. The flowers stopped blooming altogether. The trees stood stiff, silent. The birds found other places to sing, and the seasons simply forgot the garden existed. It was always cold now. Frost clung to the grass even in spring. Snow piled at the corners long after it should have melted. The trees stood bare, aching. The wind passed through without pausing. The giant waited. Days became weeks. The trees did not bud. The soil stayed hard. Even the birds had forgotten their way back. He thought spring would return eventually. He watched the sky, but the sky had turned its face away, as if even the weather could no longer bear his loneliness. One morning he heard something. Not wind, not snow. A sound like laughter. It was faint, barely there, but it pulled him to the window. In the far corner of the garden, where the wall was crumbling slightly, a small boy had slipped in, and behind him 2 more children followed. For a moment he thought he was dreaming. The sound of laughter. It struck him like music he hadn't heard since childhood. It tugged at something buried, something he didn't know was still alive. The giant watched. Where the boy stood, a tree had begun to blossom, tiny white flowers, green leaves returning. And on its lowest branch, lower than it had ever stooped, a small bird was singing. The giant stepped outside, not with anger this time, but awe. The cold melted beneath his feet. The sun peeked out from the clouds. The scent of blossoms followed him. The children turned when they saw him. They stopped laughing. The smallest boy took a step back. The giant knelt. "I'm sorry," he said, though he hadn't meant to. "I didn't know how much I needed you here." The children didn't speak, but the boy who had climbed the tree smiled. The giant reached out gently, removed the no trespassing sign, and let it fall to the ground. Then with slow, heavy hands, he began to tear down the wall. It took time. Days to open the gates, weeks for the birds to return, seasons for the trees to trust again. But they did. The garden remembered joy. The wind brought stories again. The grass invited bare feet. The children came not in fear, but laughter. And the giant would sit in the sun listening like someone remembering a song. But there was one child, the small boy who had returned first, who never came again. The giant looked for him every day. Years later, on a morning touched by the first light of spring, the giant saw him again, the same child standing beneath the same tree. But he had changed. His eyes were older, his clothes shimmered like dew, and on his hands were wounds, not bloodied, but deep, as if he had carried something for a very long time. The giant's voice trembled. "Where have you been?" "I've waited every day." The boy smiled. "You let me in when no one else would." He said, "And today I've come to let you in. And where I go now, there are gardens no wall can keep, where children are always welcome, and the seasons never leave." The boy's voice was gentle, but it held something older than time. Then he turned toward the garden wall, now covered in ivy and roses. But where there had once been stone, there was now an opening. Light poured through. The boy walked into it, and the giant followed. They found him the next day beneath the tree. His hands rested on the grass. His face held peace. The children cried, for they did not understand. But the garden did. The tree he rested under bloomed brighter than it ever had. The birds sang for hours. The wind did not rush away, it stayed humming low. The wall never returned. The laughter never left. The garden never forgot. And the place the giant had opened with his heart remained open for everyone who ever needed to come home. If this story stirred something in you, subscribe to Quiet Life HQ Stories, spoken softly magic that lingers.